In a world where status is everything and kindness is often overlooked, one moment can change your life forever. For Ava Monroe, that moment came by force. 1 minute, she was balancing trays, dodging entitled customers, and trying to survive another night at a high-end party she had no business being at. The next, she was plunged into an ice-cold pool, her uniform drenched, laughter echoing around her like a cruel symphony. Humiliated, mocked, tossed aside like she was nothing. But what no one realized, what she didn't even realize, was that someone was watching. Not just anyone, a man with power, with influence, with the ability to rewrite her entire future. That night, everything changed. And in a single moment, this mysterious stranger left everyone speechless. Because Ava wasn't just some waitress. And after that night, she would never be invisible again. The scent of expensive perfume and chlorine lingered in the air as Ava Monroe weaved through the sun-drenched poolside, balancing a silver tray stacked with cocktails. The midday sun was relentless, baking the pristine marble tiles of the resort's luxury deck, where the rich and privileged lounged as if the world existed solely to serve them. Ava, on the other hand, was here for one reason only: survival. She wasn't supposed to be working this shift. Her plan was to study for her upcoming business school quiz, but her manager had begged her to cover for someone who bailed last minute, and Ava couldn't afford to say no. Not when her mother's hospital bills were piling up like an avalanche waiting to bury her alive. Dressed in the resort's smart white uniform, she moved with precision, her expression unreadable, her hands steady. Years of experience had taught her the golden rule of serving the ultra-wealthy. Be invisible, efficient, and above all, unshakable. But today, that rule was about to be tested. At the heart of the chaos, sprawled across a cluster of sunbeds like royalty, was Vanessa Sinclair, socialite, influencer. The kind of woman who never worked a day in her life but had millions of followers hanging on her every move. And unfortunately for Ava, Vanessa had decided that today's entertainment would be her. Oh my God, can we talk about how tragic this is? Vanessa's voice, dripping with mock sympathy, cut through the chatter. Like, imagine being, 23, and still waiting tables? Her perfectly manicured friends snickered. Ava didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. Vanessa twirled a lock of platinum blonde hair, her eyes flicking to Ava with lazy cruelty. I don't know, guys. Should we start a charity? Get her a makeover? A real job? One of the other girls, a redhead named Tiffany, giggled. Please, Vanessa, where else would she go? It's not like she can just up and marry a billionaire. Laughter erupted. Ava's grip on the tray tightened. She refused to react. That was what they wanted, a show. A few feet away, perched at a private cabana, a man sat alone, sipping a whiskey on the rocks. His presence wasn't loud like the others. He wasn't trying to be seen, but something about him demanded attention. Ethan Donovan. Of course, no one here recognized him. They knew his name, his business empire, his Forbes ranking, but few ever saw the man himself in person, and he preferred it that way. He watched as Ava maneuvered through the verbal landmines Vanessa and her friends set for her. Graceful, controlled, unbreakable. Most people would have crumbled under Vanessa's scrutiny, begged, apologized, or worse, fought back. Ava did none of those things. She endured. Ethan leaned back in his seat, swirling his drink. Interesting, he murmured to himself as he watched the whole situation play out. Oops! Vanessa gasped dramatically as she suddenly knocked over a glass of champagne. The golden liquid spilled across the table, rushing toward her expensive Chanel purse. Ava instinctively lunged forward with a napkin to stop the damage. That was her job, after all. But the second she stepped closer, she knew. Too late. that it was a trap. Vanessa smirked. "Oh no, honey," she drawled, eyes flashing with delight. "You really should watch where you're going." Then she stuck out her foot. Before Ava could react, her ankle hooked onto Vanessa's leg, twisting at an awkward angle. The tray wobbled, toppled, and in an instant, Ava was airborne. She felt it before it happened, the sickening moment of weightlessness. And then, splash. The world exploded into chaos. Water rushed up her nose, drowning out the gasps and laughter above. The shock of the cold sent her body into momentary paralysis before her instincts kicked in, and she kicked upward, breaking through the surface, gasping for air. Laughter everywhere. Vanessa was howling, her phone already in her hands, recording every moment. "Oh my God, that was priceless!" Ava blinked through the water dripping down her face. Humiliation burned in her chest like fire. Her tips were floating in the pool. Her uniform was ruined. Her dignity was in shreds. And then, a cold, lethal voice broke through the laughter. The energy of the poolside shifted immediately. The sun still shone, music still played, but suddenly the air was charged with something unspoken, something dangerous. Ava, shivering, wiped the water from her eyes and turned toward the source. The man from the cabana was on his feet. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes told a different story. They were locked onto Vanessa, sharp as a knife's edge. Vanessa blinked, the first flicker of unease creeping into her perfect features. Who the hell are you?" The man took a slow step forward, his presence swallowing the space between them. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp black handkerchief, and without hesitation, offered it to Ava. The movement was small, but deliberate. The murmurs broke through the crowd. Who was he, and why was he helping the help? Ava, still trembling, hesitated before slowly taking it. The fabric was soft, expensive, the kind of material that didn't belong anywhere near her soaked hands. She looked up at him, frowning. Why was he doing this? He didn't smile. He didn't say a word. But when he looked at Vanessa again, it was obvious she was way in over her depth. The entire poolside had gone silent. Vanessa Sinclair, the queen of socialite scandals, stood frozen, her laughter cut short as she stared at the man before her. The confidence she wore like designer armor suddenly cracked under his gaze. Ava, still drenched, clutched the handkerchief the stranger had given her, her heart pounding in her chest. Who was this guy? No one spoke. No one dared. It was as if time itself had paused, waiting to see what would happen next. And then, he spoke. Apologize. The word was soft, deadly. Vanessa's brows shot up, her lips parting in shock. Excuse me. The man took a slow step forward, his presence towering over her. He wasn't shouting, wasn't throwing a tantrum like the rich men she was used to. That would have been easy to dismiss. Number. This was something far worse, controlled power. Ava felt it in the air, a shift so subtle yet so potent it sent chills down her spine. You heard me, the man said, his voice like steel wrapped in silk. Apologize. Vanessa scoffed, flipping her soaked blonde hair over her shoulder. Are you serious? Do you even know who I am? His eyes never wavered. I don't care who you are. The poolside crowd collectively sucked in a breath. No one spoke to Vanessa Sinclair like that. She blinked rapidly, trying to regain control. Look, I don't know what your deal is, but this, she gestured at Ava, still dripping wet, is not my problem. She tripped. It was an accident. Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if assessing a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. Right, he said smoothly. An accident. His gaze flickered to Tiffany and the others. I assume you all saw the accident happen. Vanessa's friends suddenly found their drinks very interesting. Tiffany coughed. Things just happen so fast, it's... Ethan cut her off. Save it. His voice was like a blade, sharp, effortless, leaving no room for argument. Vanessa folded her arms, her irritation bubbling over. Oh my God, what do you want from me? You want me to feel bad? To grovel? A slow, humorless smile ghosted over his lips. I don't want anything from you, but an apology is the least you can do. She scoffed. Or what? For the first time, Ethan's expression shifted. It was subtle, but devastating. The polite coldness in his eyes evaporated, replaced with something unreadable, something that made Vanessa physically take a step back. Careful, he said softly. The single word sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Vanessa was rattled now, and she hated it. Her eyes darted around, realizing that people were watching. Not just watching, but waiting. She was losing the upper hand. Her lips curled in a sneer. You must be new here. I don't do apologies. Ethan exhaled through his nose, almost like he'd expected that answer. Ava, who had remained quiet through the entire exchange, finally found her voice. Don't bother, she murmured, stepping forward. Her voice was quieter than his, softer, but just as firm. She's not sorry. She never will be. She turned toward Vanessa, eyes burning with something fierce, unshakable. You don't have to pretend. We both know you enjoyed every second of it. Vanessa's lips parted, surprised by Ava's defiance. It was the first time she had seen her fight back, but Ava wasn't finished. People like you think the world is your playground, she said, voice steady. That you can throw people away, humiliate them for sport, and nothing will happen. She stepped closer, dripping water, looking like she had just risen out of the ashes of her own humiliation. But someday, she whispered, so only Vanessa could hear, someone will come along and remind you that you're not untouchable. Vanessa stiffened. Ethan smirked, as if he had just discovered something interesting. Ava turned to leave, her pride in shambles but her dignity still intact. Then, wait. It was Ethan. She hesitated, looking at him over her shoulder. His gaze was locked on her, intense and unreadable. Then, with the same calm, effortless authority, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a black leather wallet. Vanessa, desperate to regain control, laughed mockingly. Oh, wow. Is this the part where you give her pity money? Cute. Ethan didn't even look at her. He pulled out a sleek embossed card and held it out to Ava. Ava frowned, hesitant. What is this? He met her gaze. A way out. Silence. Confusion flickered across her face. She didn't take the card. I don't understand. For the first time since he had spoken, Ethan's expression softened, just slightly. Take it, he said simply. Ava's fingers closed around the card. The second she turned it over, her stomach dropped. Ethan Donovan, CEO, Donovan Enterprises. Her breath hitched. Number Way. The name hit her like a freight train. Donovan Enterprises was one of the biggest conglomerates in the country. Real estate, tech, media. He owned it all. And she had just been handed his business card. Ethan gave her one last look. Call me. Then he turned, walking away without another word. Ava stared after him, the card burning in her palm, her world spinning off its axis. Vanessa, for the first time in her life, was speechless, and the entire poolside, still stunned into silence, knew one thing. Something big had just happened. Ava stood motionless, drenched and breathless, staring at the sleek business card in her trembling hands. Ethan Donovan. The name alone carried weight, power, influence. The same man who had just dismantled Vanessa Sinclair with nothing but words had also handed Ava his personal card, in front of everyone. She barely heard the murmurs around her, the hushed conversations spreading like wildfire. Wait, Ethan Donovan? As in, the millionaire? Why would someone like him talk to a waitress? Did he just offer her a job? Vanessa's expression had turned to stone. The smirk she always wore, the one that made her untouchable, was gone. Instead, she looked shaken. And for someone like Vanessa, that was rare. Ava felt her stomach twist. She wasn't used to being at the center of attention like this. She hated it. Her uniform clung to her skin, soaking wet and uncomfortable. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. What the hell had just happened? Then, like a snake striking, Vanessa snapped out of her shock. A slow, mocking smile curled at her lips, but Ava could see through it now. It was forced. "Well," Vanessa drawled, flipping her hair, "that was unexpected." She turned to Ava, tilting her head with fake curiosity. "Tell me, sweetheart, how exactly did you pull that off?" Ava narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me?" "Oh, come on," Vanessa laughed, though there was an edge of desperation to it now. "A millionaire? Taking an interest in you? Let's be real, that doesn't just happen." Ava clenched her jaw. She knew exactly what Vanessa was implying, and judging by the smirks on the faces of her so-called friends, so did they. Vanessa leaned in, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Did you sleep with him or something?" A sharp gasp echoed from the crowd. Ava's stomach churned. She opened her mouth, ready to snap back, but before she could, another voice cut through the tension. "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Vanessa." The words were spoken calmly, smoothly, but they landed like a punch. Ava turned, startled. Ethan was back. He hadn't left the resort at all. He had only gone a few steps away, talking to one of the hotel managers. But now, he was standing behind Vanessa, and he had heard everything. Vanessa stiffened. She spun around, attempting to regain her composure. I wasn't." Ethan didn't let her finish. He took another slow step forward, hands in his pockets, completely unfazed. "I don't recall asking for your opinion on my decisions," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "But since you seem so eager to know, let me make one thing very clear." He glanced at Ava before looking Vanessa dead in the eye. "I don't give my card to just anyone." A wave of electricity shot through the air. Ava's chest tightened. Was this really happening? Vanessa's face flushed with embarrassment. I didn't mean..." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "No, I think you did." It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But the power behind his words, it was enough to silence an entire crowd. Vanessa's jaw clenched, her nails digging into her expensive purse. Ava almost felt pity. Almost. Vanessa had spent years making sure people like Ava felt small. Now, for the first time ever, Vanessa was the one shrinking. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her designer sandals clacking against the tiles. Her friends, still in shock, hesitated before rushing after her. And just like that, Vanessa Sinclair, queen of socialites, had lost. Ava exhaled, her entire body still trembling from the confrontation. People were still watching, still whispering. She turned to Ethan, gripping the business card tightly. "Why?" He arched a brow. "Why what?" "Why this?" She lifted the card slightly. "Why give this to me?" Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. "I admire resilience." She swallowed hard. "That's it?" "For now." Her stomach flipped. What the hell was that supposed to mean? She hesitated. Before she could form a sentence, her manager's panicked voice interrupted them. "Ava!" She turned, wincing as she saw Jeff, the restaurant manager, storming toward her. His face was red, his expression a mixture of anger and panic. "You're making a scene," he hissed under his breath, glancing nervously at the guests. "What the hell happened?" Ava opened her mouth, but Ethan spoke first. "She was assaulted," he said smoothly. Jeff flinched. "Mr. Donovan, sir, I had no idea." I assume you'll be firing Vanessa Sinclair from your guest list? Ethan interrupted. Jeff went pale. Well, she's a very important client, and Ethan smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. You value her business? He asked casually. Jeff nodded quickly. Yes, of course, sir. Ethan nodded. Good, because if she steps foot on this property again... He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then Donovan Enterprises will no longer be interested in any partnership with this resort. Silence. Jeff visibly panicked. Understood, he said quickly, sweating now. I'll make sure she's never allowed back. Ethan gave a satisfied nod before turning back to Ava. Her heart was racing. She wasn't used to people standing up for her, especially not someone like him. But before she could say anything, Jeff turned to her, eyes flashing with irritation. And you, get out of that uniform and go home. You're done for today. Ava frowned. But my shift isn't... I said go home. She stiffened. Unbelievable. She was the one who got pushed into the damn pool, and now she was being punished? She opened her mouth to argue, but Ethan spoke first. She's done here. Jeff frowned. That's what I said. Ethan cut him off. No. His voice was cool, firm. She's done working for you. Ava's eyes widened. Wait, what? Ethan turned to her, smirking slightly. Did you think I gave you my card for decoration? Ava's heart nearly stopped. Jeff gasped. Sir? Ethan glanced at him. She quits. Ava felt lightheaded. What the hell was happening? Ava stood frozen, dripping wet, her uniform clinging uncomfortably to her skin. Had she heard him correctly? She quits. Her eyes flicked from Ethan to Jeff, who looked just as stunned. The restaurant manager's mouth opened and closed, struggling to form words. Sir, with all due respect, Jeff stammered, Ava is an employee here. I don't see how... Ethan turned slightly, just enough to give Jeff a look that shut him down instantly. You don't need to see how, Ethan said smoothly. You just need to accept it. Jeff gulped. He wasn't a stupid man. Donovan Enterprises had connections everywhere. If Ethan wanted to, he could make sure this resort never saw another wealthy investor again. Of course, sir, Jeff said quickly, backtracking. I'll, process the resignation immediately. Ava felt a surge of frustration. Resignation. She never even agreed to this. Ethan had just announced it, like it was a fact. She turned to him, gripping the business card in her damp fingers. Excuse me? I never said I was quitting. Ethan met her gaze, completely unfazed. Would you rather stay? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because the truth was, she didn't. She hated this job. She hated the way customers treated her like she was invisible unless they needed something. She hated how people like Vanessa could humiliate her, and all she could do was smile and take it because she needed the paycheck. And yet... What exactly are you offering? She asked, her voice quieter than before. Ethan studied her for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. Dinner, she blinked. What? Dinner, he repeated. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Ava's stomach flipped. Jeff let out a small, strangled noise. Sir, I don't think... Ethan didn't even acknowledge him. His full attention was still on Ava. She hesitated, narrowing her eyes. You want me to have dinner with you? A flicker of amusement danced across his features. Is that so hard to believe? Yes, she said bluntly. He smirked. Why? Because, she gestured between them. You're you, and I'm me. Ethan exhaled, shaking his head slightly, as if she were missing something obvious. Ava. Her stomach twisted. The way he said her name, like it was something worth saying, worth remembering, sent a shiver down her spine. I don't waste my time, he continued. I don't do pity. and I sure as hell don't chase things that don't interest me. Ava felt her breath hitch. Was he saying, dinner, he repeated, one night, no strings. His gaze darkened slightly. Unless you want there to be. Heat shot through her body. Was he flirting with her? The Ethan Donovan? She wasn't the only one thrown off. Jeff looked like he was about to pass out. A few remaining guests were still watching, their whispers growing louder. And somewhere in the distance, she was sure Vanessa was seething. Ava swallowed hard. Why me? Ethan tilted his head. Why not you? She let out a breathless laugh. That's not an answer. He stepped closer, just enough to make her pulse spike. Maybe, he said slowly, I don't have an answer yet. His voice was low, smooth, like he was enjoying this. And Ava had a sinking feeling that Ethan Donovan never did anything unless it intrigued him. Her brain screamed at her to say no, to walk away before she got sucked into something way out of her depth. But her heart was saying something completely different. Ava clenched her jaw. Fine. Ethan's lips twitched. Fine? She crossed her arms. One dinner. That's it? Of course. She didn't believe him. Not one bit. But she was about to find out just how dangerous it was to say yes to Ethan Donovan. Ethan took out his phone, tapped a few buttons, and within seconds, her own phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out hesitantly, a text message, from a number she didn't recognize. Ethan, 8 p.m. I'll send a car. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. Ava's throat went dry. What had she just gotten herself into? She looked up, but Ethan was already turning to leave. Jeff exhaled in relief. The tension that had gripped the air finally loosened. As Ethan walked away, she caught a glimpse of something. A man, one of the hotel's higher-ups, rushed up to Ethan and started speaking in hushed tones. Ethan didn't look at him. He merely nodded once, slid on his sunglasses, and disappeared into a sleek black car that had just pulled up. And just like that, he was gone. Ava was left standing there, completely unraveling. Jeff cleared his throat. Well, he straightened his tie. You, better go home, since, you don't work here anymore. Ava shot him a glare, still processing everything. As she turned to leave, the whispers followed her. Did she just get a date with Ethan Donovan? Is she insane? Why didn't she say yes immediately? Do you think he'll actually show up? Ava blocked them out as she made her way inside. She was too busy dealing with her own thoughts, because she wasn't sure was just as stunned and confused as they were. Ava stood in front of her closet, heart pounding as she stared at the mess of clothes in front of her. Powerful. That was what Ethan had told her. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. She huffed, crossing her arms. How the hell was she supposed to do that? Did he mean elegant, sexy, commanding? And why did she even care? She should have said no. Should have ignored the ridiculous, intoxicating pull of this entire situation. But she hadn't. And now she was 2 hours away from stepping into a world she had no business being in. A world that belonged to him. She had looked him up after she got home, of course. Ethan Donovan wasn't just some rich guy. He was one of the richest men in the country. Chief Executive Officer of Donovan Enterprises, owner of multiple high-end resorts, tech companies, and investment firms. And yet, despite his fortune, there was barely any personal information about him online. No messy scandals, no leaked ex-girlfriends coming out of the woodwork to expose his secrets. Just a man who built an empire with ruthless precision. A man who could have had any woman he wanted. So why had he chosen her? Ava shook off the thought and grabbed a sleek black dress from her hanger. No frills, no fuss, just confidence. It would have to do. At exactly 7:59 p.m., her phone buzzed. It was from an unknown number, Your car is outside." Ava took a deep breath and stepped out of her apartment, and then froze. Because parked outside wasn't just any car. It was a jet black Rolls-Royce. The kind of car that didn't just cost money. The driver, a sharply dressed man with an earpiece, stepped out and opened the door for her. "Miss Ava." She hesitated. This was crazy, all of it. But despite the warnings screaming in her mind, she slid inside. The interior was insane. Leather seats, a built-in bar, soft ambient lighting that made the entire space feel like something out of a movie. She swallowed hard. What the hell was she doing? The car moved smoothly through the streets, the city lights blurring past her window. 15 minutes later, they arrived at a private restaurant, the kind of place that didn't have a name, just a gold plaque and a security guard who let in only the elite. Before she could fully process it, the driver was opening her door. "Mr. Donovan is waiting inside." Ava stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and there he was, Ethan Donovan, seated at a private table near the floor-to-ceiling windows. A breathtaking view of the city behind him. But somehow he was even more captivating. Black suit, open collar, an effortless aura of control. He looked up as she approached, and for a split second, something flickered in his expression. Approval. She couldn't tell. But then he smirked. "You clean up well." Ava rolled her eyes and took a seat. "And you still sound arrogant." He let out a low chuckle. "I like that you don't sugarcoat things." A waiter appeared almost immediately. "Shall I bring the usual, sir?" Ava raised a brow. "The usual?" Ethan barely nodded before the waiter disappeared. "So," he said, leaning back, "tell me something about you." Ava frowned. "Aren't you supposed to know everything already? Rich guys like you do background checks, right?" Ethan's lips twitched. "I do when it's necessary." "Not for me?" "No." He tilted his head. "I wanted you to tell me yourself." Something about the way he said it made her nervous. She exhaled. "All right. I'm Ava Carter, 24. No trust fund, no famous last name, no connections. Just a waitress who," she hesitated, "was a waitress." Ethan nodded as if committing it to memory. "And what do you want to be?" Ava blinked. "What? What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before, not in a way that actually mattered. For years, she had been stuck in survival mode. Hospital bills for her mum, rent, school fees and textbooks, shifts that drained her soul. Dreams weren't a luxury she could afford. She swallowed. "I don't know." Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he leaned forward. "Good." She frowned. "Good? It means you're open to possibilities." A waiter appeared, placing 2 elegant plates in front of them. Ava barely recognized the dish. It looked expensive, probably something she couldn't even pronounce. She hesitated. "So, what's the real reason you brought me here?" Ethan took a sip of his wine, completely unbothered. "Does there have to be a reason?" "Yes." His lips curved into that infuriatingly knowing smile. "All right," he said slowly. "I brought you here because you interest me." Ava's heart skipped. "Interest you how?" "That," he said, picking up his fork, "is what I'm figuring out." And for the first time in her life, Ava realized she was the mystery. And Ethan Donovan, he was the one trying to solve her. Ava wasn't sure how it happened. One dinner turned into two. Two turned into late-night phone calls. And before she knew it, she was seeing Ethan Donovan regularly. Not in the way she expected. There were no dramatic declarations, no sweeping gestures of wealth shoved in her face. Ethan didn't buy her affection. He earned it. It started subtly. The way he listened, the way he challenged her when she doubted herself, The way he never treated her like she was beneath him just because she wasn't from his world. For the first time in her life, Ava felt like someone saw her, truly saw her, and it terrified her. One night, after a long evening at a gala, he had insisted she attend with him. They found themselves on the rooftop of his penthouse. The city stretched out beneath them, a sea of glowing lights. Ava leaned against the glass railing, sipping a drink Ethan had poured for her. "This is insane," Ethan smirked. "That's a common theme with you." She rolled her eyes but didn't argue, because honestly, he wasn't wrong. "Seriously," she murmured, staring at the skyline. "How did I end up here?" Ethan stepped beside her, close enough that she felt his warmth. "You belong here." Ava let out a short laugh. "I really don't." He turned to face her fully. "And why not?" She hesitated, struggling to put it into words. Because she was Ava Carter, a waitress who had been struggling to make ends meet only weeks ago? Because she wasn't the kind of woman who usually caught the eye of a millionaire? Because she was scared? Ethan seemed to sense her thoughts. His voice dropped. "You think I don't know what people say? That they whisper behind your back, wondering why I'm spending my time with you?" Ava looked away. He was right. She had heard the whispers at every event, every high-end restaurant he took her to. Gold digger, charity case, nothing but a temporary distraction. Ethan's fingers brushed her chin, turning her back to him. "Let them talk," he murmured. "I don't give a damn." Ava swallowed, because he meant it. He didn't care about appearances, about what his world expected of him. He only cared about her. Her pulse raced. "Ethan," he took a step closer. "Tell me you don't feel this." Her heart slammed against her ribs. Because she did. She felt it every time he looked at her. Every time he spoke her name like it was something precious. Every time he shattered every assumption she had about men like him. Slowly, hesitantly, she whispered, "I feel it." Ethan exhaled, as if those words were what he'd been waiting for. Then he kissed her. And Ava, she let him, because for the first time in her life, she was done running. The days that followed were different. The dates were no longer just luxurious dinners and high-end galas. Ethan started taking her to places he actually loved. A quiet jazz club tucked away in the city. A hidden beach where he could escape from the world. One evening, he took her to a rooftop garden he had built, not for business, not for status, but because he liked to grow things. Ava had stared at him in shock. "You? A gardener?" Ethan had just smirked, handing her a small potted plant. "Try not to kill this one." She had smacked his arm, but the warmth in her chest had been undeniable. Because this was the Ethan Donovan no one saw. Not the millionaire, not the business tycoon, just a man. A man who was slowly, dangerously falling for her. And Ava, she was falling too. Ava never expected to fall for someone like Ethan Donovan, but now she couldn't imagine her life without him. It wasn't about the money or the luxury, it was the way he made her feel, like she mattered. Like she was more than just a struggling waitress trying to survive. He challenged her. He believed in her. And most of all, he chose her over and over again. But love, even the kind that feels like a fairy tale, isn't without its battles. And Ava was about to face her biggest one yet. She should have seen it coming. The first article hit the internet like a wrecking ball. Billionaire Ethan Donovan's mysterious new girlfriend. Who is Ava Carter? Then came the next one. Waitress turned socialite. Is she just another gold digger? And the worst. Sources say she's after his fortune. Ethan's inner circle concerned. Ava sat frozen at Ethan's kitchen counter, staring at her phone as the articles spread like wildfire. Her stomach twisted. They weren't just talking about her. They were tearing her apart. Her past, her job, her lack of a wealthy background. Everything was being picked apart like she was some kind of fraud. A hand gently took her phone, placing it down on the counter. Ethan. His jaw was tight, his eyes darker than usual. "Don't read that garbage," he muttered. Ava exhaled sharply. "It's not garbage if it's true." His gaze snapped to hers. "Which part?" "That I'm a nobody," she shot back. "That I don't belong in your world? That people think I'm only with you for your money?" Ethan's expression darkened. "You think I give a damn what people say?" His voice was low, dangerous. Ava swallowed. "Maybe you should." Ethan stepped closer. "You think I'm with you because of your bank account?" She hesitated. He took another step, his voice softer now. "You think I look at you and see someone who isn't good enough?" A lump formed in her throat, because deep down, that was her biggest fear. Ethan reached for her hands, holding them firmly. "Listen to me," he said, voice steady. "I don't care what they write. I don't care what they think. I care about you." Ava blinked back, the sting in her eyes. Ethan exhaled, squeezing her hands. "Let me handle this." She hesitated. "How?" His smirk returned, but this time it was sharper. "I have my ways." By the next morning, everything had changed. Ethan had gone on the record, giving an exclusive interview. Not to defend himself, not to justify their relationship, but to shut it all down. When the article dropped, Ava read every word in disbelief. Ethan Donovan sets the record straight on Ava Carter. "She's not after my money. She's after my heart." Her heart stopped. The journalist had asked him directly, "Are you concerned about her past?" "Not at all. Ava is one of the strongest people I've ever met. Her past isn't something to judge, it's something to admire. People think she's using you for your money. Then people are idiots. So, what is she to you?" His answer had been simple. "She's the woman I love." Ava gasped, because Ethan hadn't said those words to her yet. Not once. And now the whole world knew. That night, Ethan found her standing on his balcony, staring at the city. He didn't say anything, just wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. "I saw the article," she murmured. "I figured." His voice was calm, steady. Ava turned in his arms, searching his gaze. "Did you mean it?" He didn't hesitate. "Every word." Her heart pounded. "You've never said it before," she whispered. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I was waiting for the right moment." She swallowed hard. "And this was it? A public declaration?" His lips twitched. "Well, you always said I was dramatic." Ava let out a shaky laugh. Then, in the soft glow of the city lights, he cupped her face. And finally, he said it to her. Not the world, just her. "I love you, Ava." Tears pricked her eyes, because for the first time, she truly believed it. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, and when she whispered, "I love you too," she swore she felt his heart race against hers. Ethan Donovan, the millionaire, the untouchable man, had found something more valuable than all his wealth. Love. And Ava. She had found something just as priceless. A man who saw her worth, not in money, but in everything she was. Life has a way of testing us, pushing us to the edge, seeing if we'll break or if we'll rise. Ava Carter was never supposed to be part of Ethan Donovan's world. She was just a waitress, just another face in the crowd. But fate had other plans. That night by the pool, when they laughed at her, humiliated her, tried to make her feel small, it should have broken her. Instead, it led her to something greater, because Ethan didn't just step in to defend her. He saw her, he chose her, and together they built something no amount of money could buy: love, respect, and a future they created on their own terms. Ava started as the girl no one noticed. She became the woman no one could ignore. And that's the thing about life. You never know when the worst moment of your story might just be the beginning of something incredible. Here on this channel, we bring you stories of resilience, love, and the unexpected twists that change lives forever. If Ava's journey inspired you, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because sometimes one moment is all it takes to rewrite everything.